Okay, so welcome everybody. This is our wellness pop-up uh, for Asian Americans, and it is really a starting point that we hope will lead to much longer, kinds of engagements with Asian American studies and with the artists and writers who are a part of this wellness pop-up and contributors to this project. So I just want to welcome everybody. My name is Jason Oliver Chang. I'm Associate Professor of History and Asian American Studies at the University of Connecticut. And I also direct the Asian and Asian American Studies Institute. And I wanted to just kind of start with a little bit of a backstory for us, how we got to this place. It doesn't seem typical to have mental health wellness kinds of clinics or these kinds of events, but this has really grown out of my learning experience with Asian American studies and collaborating with artists and writers and community organizations, and just the need to rethink what Asian American studies is and where does it live, and how do we practice it when we're not in the classroom. And so this kind of work where we are thinking about our own mental wellness and also our community, it really brought this kind of the need for an event like this to be put in place and to make this a regular kind of engagement, not just a one-time thing, because our mental health is something that requires continuous cultivation and self-awareness. And so just to give you a little bit more to understand how these players sort of came together. So last year, the Institute hosted a summit rethinking Asian American studies. And one of the participants there was the Mimi Cook and Lawrence Mimbui Davis, who were invited to talk about their Asian American literary review work, particularly the Open in Emergency special issue. And many of you may have learned about this and the very compelling, interesting, fascinating, popular tarot card project. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But one of the things that came out of that summit was the need to practice Asian American studies in community, and that this is something that I really look to Mimi and Lawrence for. They are my inspiration for doing more of this work and to spread, how we think about applying Asian American studies into our lives. And they're going to explain a lot more detail and eloquently than I can. But the pandemic put a lot of what we had learned into practice. It demanded that we give attention to our mental health and the recognition of the way that racism impacts how well we are doing, and that was a real wake-up call, I think, for Asian Americans across the country. And so this also led to the formation of new activist communities, particularly the I Am Not a Virus campaign, started right here in West Hartford, Connecticut, by Mike Keogh and his campaign co-chair, Kelly Ha. And so I could think of no better way to advance this project than by partnering with I'm Not a Virus. And they are our activists in residence this year at the Institute. And with that, we bring along all of their community partners as well. The Admirasia campaign to make a coloring book of Asian American pioneers, and that will be it's already released. They're already working on a volume 2. This is an incredible contribution, and with Kelly Ha's leadership in bringing mental health attention to the I'm Not a Virus campaign. We really have an incredible team. And if I could just brag for a second, Kelly Ha is one of my old students, and just really so excited to see her, thinking about Asian American studies and taking the things that we learned in the class and doing something I couldn't have imagined. So really, really proud of Kelly's work. And so one thing to mention, one more thing to mention before I hand this over to Mimi and Lawrence to learn more about the Tarot Card Project and Open in Emergency. I wanted to share that the workbook will be released around 5 p.m. today. So all the attendees, all the people who've registered will be receiving the workbook, which is a fantastic collection of journaling, coloring book, wellness prompts, literature, poetry. It's really an amazing collection of material that's going to be released around 5 today. And just as a heads up for people who want to volunteer into some of our activities, we'll need you to opt in, and then we can change your settings so that you can be a panelist and you can interact with us more fully. So just also to give some props to Vin Dang, who is the designer of and the compiler for the workbook. It did a fantastic job. We have Kenny Tran, who is doing he was our Zoom host on the back end, and Michelle Lowe, who's also going to be helping us out too. So really thanks to all the people behind the scenes and the contributors and partners. This has been a really fantastic project. So we have 3 parts to this program. You're welcome to come in and out of this space as you wish this afternoon. And the first part, we're going to be talking about the Tarot Card Project. And the second part, starting at 4 p.m., we'll be doing journaling. And then at 5 p.m. we're going to start a letter writing salon. And I completely forgot one of our key contributors, Alina Liao from Zenit Journals is here, and she'll be hosting the journaling salon. I'm so sorry to not have mentioned you in our partners. We're so glad that you're part of this, and really looking forward to learning about your journaling practice and how people can make this part of their everyday wellness. With that, have I missed anything? No, I think maybe we will just move on. So let me introduce to you all Mimi and Lawrence. So Mimi Cook is a writer, a scholar, and teacher of things unwell, and the 2019-2020 scholar, activist, artist in residence in disability studies at Georgetown University. And she is also the co-editor of the Open in Emergency special issue of the Asian American Literary Review. And then we also have Lawrence Min Bui Davis, who is a curator at the Smithsonian Institution's Asia Pacific America Center and editor of the Asian American Literary Review. Also good friends. Thanks for being here, guys. This is wonderful. And thank you for sharing your work. So I want to turn it over to you, and if we could just hear a little bit more about the project and how it came together, it'd be wonderful.
Thank you so much, Jason, for having us.
Yeah, and thank you to the other folks part of this program. We're excited to work with you and thankful for the work that you do, and to all the attendees.
Yeah, thank you for joining and making time for thinking about wellness, for taking care of yourselves. That's super important right now. So we're going to talk a little bit about Open Emergency, the mental health project that we worked on that was first published in 2016. and included the Asian American Tarot cards. Lawrence will now, Vanna White will now hold up the original Asian American Tarot deck that has 23 cards. And this project, we'll talk a little bit about the background of the project and then specifically about where the tarot cards fit in. So it sold out in a year, and then from popularity, but also people course adopting and teaching the issue, which was super exciting for us to have something that's about mental health being taught in the classroom, but also that is a hybrid arts project, right? So not strict scholarship, a book arts project that engages the humanities and creative writing and visual work to engage questions about wellness and mental health in the Asian American community in new ways. And so then we worked really hard to get a second edition out, to reprint it. That actually just came out like last week after a long, hard haul through the publishing process during a pandemic. So this is the new tarot deck with the new yellow box that now has 30 cards. We expanded it and added 7 new cards.
And
Lawrence wants to point out, very importantly, that the new box has a thumb cutout, which was very important for us to do because of clear access issues with the first box that did not have a thumb cutout. And a friend of ours actually broke a tooth trying to open the box, the first box.
yes.
So hopefully no teeth will be broken on this second
Yes.
box.
So disability justice in the form of a
Thumb
notch.
cutout. Yeah. Which was one access thing that we tried to improve with the second edition. So do you want to say a little more about the project? And then
Yeah, so what we were imagining for our time together, and we definitely are, if anyone wants to shoot questions or comments in the chat box, happy to kind of answer questions at any point. We were thinking we would walk through some of the genesis of the project, some of the work that went into particular cards, do a little bit of reading of cards and pull some up. We could do a couple of model readings, but we were also imagining for people that might have the cards or get the cards in the future to think about a kind of teach the teacher, talking about how you might do readings for yourself or for other people if you're new to tarot readings or want to be thinking about this as particularly as a wellness practice that you can do going forward.
So the project as a mental health project originates, I guess, in several places. Personally, for me, as somebody who has managed depression and specifically dealt with postpartum depression after I had my daughter 9 years ago, forced me to really think about mental health for Asian Americans, something that, you know, my family didn't really talk about, didn't have particular language around. And I started searching for language, and I found that the language that exists around mental health is quite lacking. It's often from a medical model that really pathologizes the individual, right? The individual is ill, and then we treat the illness and we cure the individual. And that felt very limiting to me as a way to think about wellness for myself, but also for my community, because if you don't locate it in history, social structures, legacies of violence, racism, if you don't locate it in those things, then it feels like a very limited way of thinking about wellness and unwellness. So paired with now AALR, Asian American Literary Review, which I'll let you say a little bit about, gave us a kind of different, a new approach formally to think about mental health.
So yeah, along those lines, like thinking about it as an arts intervention and the arts as a space, whether it's of personal creation or of engaging work as a reader or as a viewer, or as a community making sense of work together, so much room for like this kind of creative ambiguity and for interpretation and meaning making. And so wanting to think about mental health as that kind of space and getting away from like a medical model, which places so much of the onus and turns over kind of our authority and our entitlement, our license to engage our own mental health to a kind of field of expertise, and positions us as non-experts and people without authority or ability to make sense of their own mental health or unwellness, and wanting to think about ways to push communal, co-creative processes for making meaning together, and to look at not just like inventing new things, but this is where the tarot came from, is to like, where are there practices that already exist in Asian American communities where we are providing care for one another, where we are making meaning of our lives in ways that diagnose unwellness, that think about larger structures that Mimi mentioned. And one place we looked to was fortune telling, which is so prevalent across so many of our communities in various different forms, and not necessarily tarot, but we thought tarot would be a fun way, a fun kind of system to hack and to borrow and adapt, and then maybe replace traditional tarot figures with, for instance, like the refugee or the deportee, or figures that we know are particularly resonant in Asian American life right now. That was kind of one of our initial turns to tarot. And I'll actually let Mimi tell a story about the first moment we decided to put together the deck and where it came from. But like, that was some of the thinking, is like an arts intervention that would allow us opportunities to create a practice or a hybrid practice together. And what we really love about the decks is that they've been used in different ways, and that people have their own kind of practice for using the cards and use it in different ways in their lives or in their workspaces. And that it's a kind of like growing syncretic process that we don't own, that we just have pushed out into the world, and offer opportunities for people to create their own new practices. And rather than like fortune telling being a static thing that is kind of like past oriented, that we have the ability to take and make it as we want to. And I think playing a little bit fast and loose with it, and asking artists to reinterpret it, and asking poets and writers to create these kind of new tarot readings is like that initial process, but only the start of what meaning making can look like, that we do have this ability and this authority to kind of rethink what the invisible forces that shape our lives actually are, and how they might shape our lives, and how we can use them to rethink what creates our unwellness and what can create wellness for each other.
The story that Lawrence mentions is so one genesis point for the tarot cards. A friend of ours, also a scholar in Asian American Studies, Long Bui, at an Asian American Studies conference one year, was doing tarot readings with a traditional tarot deck during downtime at the conference. And anybody who goes to an academic conference knows that there's like moments in which everyone just gets drunk, because, you know, conferences are awful and great at the same time. And so this is like downtime at the bar. Everyone's hanging out after all the awful sessions are over. And he's doing tarot readings. And it was both hilarious and fun and uncanny and eerie at the same time. Lots of wowing around like the things that he was sort of able to interpret about people's lives. He told him he was going to get a new job soon. He did get a new job soon after. So as we were watching this and enjoying it, you know, me with I have a religious studies background, watching this, I'm like, this is meaning making and religion happening in front of me, right? This is like taking a new interpretive practice to people's lives to help them explain what's going on in their lives, what to expect, how to feel about things, to process this, and to share story in community. And it was really, really powerful. I was actually not familiar with tarot before this. And then I thought, okay, how much more powerful would this be if the cards were not white as fuck from, you know, Italian medieval playing cards that really have like no historical significance for and don't draw upon real history and context that makes sense for our communities. So wouldn't it be more powerful if they were written for Asian Americans, by Asian Americans, drawing upon Asian American studies knowledges that come out of our communities? And so that's sparked us thinking, okay, this is a form that can have all this power. How do we shift the form or take this form and do something different with it by imbuing it with the knowledges that come out of communities that we work with, that we know? So scholars, writers, artists, what can we tap in those communities to bring out something different, deeper, better for our communities? And so we started thinking about the major arcana, which are the major archetypes, if you know anything about tarot. And we started revisiting them, thinking about which ones make sense to keep for Asian Americans, not because they're universal, because that just means white, because they're helpful, right, for understanding our experience, which ones are not helpful, what other categories could be helpful, and then who that we know is doing creative work that could help us better understand this particular category. So Lawrence mentioned, what did you mention? The refugee and the deportee as certain ones. We have the model minority, the foreigner. And so we're like, who is working on these kinds of issues to help us better understand, for instance, what does it mean to think about the role of the refugee? And we tapped Mimi Tingwing, this is the refugee card Lawrence is holding up, to theorize and write about the refugee experience, but also the structures involved when you think critically about war and refugee experience that help us understand an element of our lives. And that art was, we paired writers with visual artists, and that art there was rendered by artist Simi Kang.
I mean, I want to like jump in also and like jump back to something that Jason said earlier about like the function and point of Asian American studies, because I was thinking about that, like what happened in that moment with Lao was like, that's as much Asian American studies as like the formal official panel that was happening like 15 feet away inside of a room. And I think asking Mimi Tingwing to write that card is as important and as a focused distillation of her thinking on refugee experience and history and like critical refugee studies, theorizations, as like a paper or a book might be. And like, what does it mean to ask her to do this and to think about like this production as doing a kind of work in the world that can be in a classroom or can be in a conference space, but can exist in other spaces and do a different kind of work out in the world as well.
And so that's about form, right? In some ways, about the kinds of languages that we're asking, or that maybe we don't normally use to think about these kinds of ideas and to develop new language. And so much of this project is trying to develop new language through formal innovation. And the tarot card, as one way, because so if you know, traditional tarot doesn't actually come with text. It's an image, and then you're supposed to learn some other mystical way about how to interpret these cards, right? People read books and follow blogs and stuff to learn about it. We decided to actually include text with our visual cards. So like when Lawrence held up, where did it go? The refugee, or on any other card.
Here, why don't you do the mongrel?
I will hold up the mongrel, which is one of our new cards that we added in the second edition. Visual art by artist Matt Huynh, and text, which is on the back, which I'll pull up a slide if I can, so you can see the text better. Theorized and written by Jason Oliver Chang. I don't know who that is, but it's a good card. So the text is meant to theorize, distill that knowledge that Lawrence met, and provide a guide for how to interpret these kinds of forces in your own life, because we wanted these cards to be usable as practice, not simply art pieces to be looked at, but actually you can use them in your life as a wellness practice, as a way of thinking about your place in the world, meaning around your experiences, and the way these different invisible forces affect you personally. Should we share some cards, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, I'd love to like actually share some slides of cards and read them together and talk a little bit about like what it looks like to draw one of these cards for ourselves or for someone we're doing a reading for. And
I'm going to attempt a screen share. We'll see if this works. Give me a moment. Am I sharing a particular card first? How do you want me to do this?
Do you want to do student or you want to do emergency?
Okay, let me do this. Let me see if the screen share works. Oh, host has disabled participant screen sharing. Okay, so we cannot do a screen share. Only the host can do screen share. So we'll have to just read the card out loud.
That is fixed, Mimi. I just fixed that. My apologies.
Okay. Nope, no problems.
No worries.
We have to roll with this stuff. Okay, so now I will try. Yes, thank you. That worked.
Let's do the emergency first.
Okay. Okay. Jason, can you give us a thumbs up if You can see the screen share? Awesome. Okay. So this is one of the new cards that we added. So we had 23 cards, which were to model after the 22 cards in the major arcana. We had a 23rd card called the Ghost that haunted the first deck. We thought that was very clever. And then we expanded the major arcana by adding 7 new cards, which is very untraditional because the major arcana does not expand past 22. But we felt like this should be something that is able to continue to grow as the community deems it necessary. Like, do we need new archetypes to help us understand our experiences? And we felt like the community, in response to the original deck, said, yes, we need more, and we need different kinds of ideas. You want to talk a little bit about this, just in general, the 7 cards, the 7 new cards, or go straight into?
What were you imagining talking about?
Well, I guess I'll just say that we figured out some new archetypes that we thought would be helpful. The emergency one we're looking at right now being one of them. But we also ran a contest and had people submit ideas and pitch ideas so that we could get a sense of what the community thought would be necessary and helpful. And so actually Jason's card, the Mongrel, came out of that contest. Many cards wanted to think about actually mixed raciness. Okay, so I'll let you talk about the emergency.
Yeah. Do we want to see if Simi would read it?
You want to make Simi read it? Simi, the author, is we know is a panelist. I mean, not a panelist, an attendee right now. But I don't want to put her on the spot, so you read it out loud. She's going to text me angrily right now if we make her do that. So. All
right. So yeah, I think we'll read it and then want to talk about it a little bit, or we invite other co-panelists or folks in the audience who want to kind of chime in with thoughts about it, either just, in response to anything that kind of sparks, or how it might apply to your life or experience right now, or one another's. I kind of leave it open. But yeah, I'll go ahead and read, and since we're not forcing Simi to. The emergency is the 25th card in the major arcana. It is enormous, a city 85% underwater, planes flying into buildings, an executive order. But the nation's emergency is and is not yours. The Browning of America looks and sounds like a tornado siren. It travels as a warning. Stories told about, but not with you. Stories that look and sound like you, are the same color and shape of you, but are not you. Terrorist, go back somewhere, infesting the Ivy League, not American. Your,
where are you?
Here.
Niqab?
Your niqab?
Oh, I don't know the next
I don't
word,
know
sorry.
the
We're going to butcher this pronunciation, we're sorry.
Sorry for our Hmong viewers. Pajntab, Kirpan are crises of their making. The emergency is product and carrier of xenophobia and settler white supremacy. But this card also reminds us that every emergency contains emergence. We always have the capacity to emerge from emergency. It will not be easy. The world you emerge into remains inhospitable, a nationalism that does not want you, that names its necropolitics relief efforts. And yet, you, grandchild, progeny, new ancestor, will emerge not in resilience, but in explicit resistance of the good death, how they kill us and say, oh, but look how good they were at dying. A refutation of the ways your family, your community, yourself have been folded into, evacuated from, silenced in this place that names itself melting pot. Beloved, you are alchemizing a world wholly outside of theirs. You are opening in emergency. So I have lots of thoughts about this, but I would love to see if anybody else has anything that comes to mind that they want to talk about, or I'm sure Mimi will have plenty of things she wants to say.
Yeah, we actually have a question from the crowd, so I'm going to bring up someone who had a question, and they're going to ask it by voice, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah.
Cool.
Should I stop screen sharing?
Where did they go?
We lost them.
Yeah, they left the
They'll come
Zoom
back.
chat.
No worries.
But we do actually have a queue of people who are interested in receiving a live tarot card reading.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
So-
so we can talk about that as well. But I want to talk first about just this card that Lawrence just read, and I'm guessing, and he can say a little more about why he chose to start with this one. But I'm guessing it has to do with the fact that we are in a fucking emergency right now, right? But this card was written before the pandemic emergency. And as you can see, it mentions all different kinds of emergencies, personal and communal and national, and the way the word emergency is deployed in different ways, and the effect of those kinds of deployments. And so right now, I think it's super helpful for me to think about, like, when I say we're in emergency, what do I mean? When others say we're in a crisis or emergency, what do they mean? What does it mean to live during a pandemic that's being deemed both crisis by some, but non-crisis by others? That has differential effect on, different communities. So this card is helping me think about some of those layers.
Yeah, I'm like thinking about the line, "The emergency is product and carrier of xenophobia," and as our our lovely co-panelists with I'm Not a Virus, how are pointing out through that campaign is like both that this pandemic moment is an occasion for xenophobia, but obviously not the start of it, and that we need to think about it in a much larger context, and that emergencies are always, as this card helps us remember, brings to the fore tensions that are always in place, but also becomes an opportunity that's capitalized upon by larger structures and institutions, but can be capitalized upon by community level organizing. Emergency always carries the possibility of emergence. It contains, what we're doing right at this moment is demanding more attention to mental health, specifically in the context of we're presumably the vast majority of us sitting here on a Zoom call that if it weren't for the pandemic, we would be somewhere doing something lifetime in person. Like, we are adapting and thinking about connecting virtually because we have to, but not just connecting virtually, along lines of like, this is a class or this is a program that I want to watch, but specifically to organize around justice issues and to think about anti-Asian racism in the context of wellness and our unwellness being produced by a larger nation state that is committed to kind of transhistorical exploitation and makes use of us how it will at particular times, and then is happy to produce our damage or for our damage to serve its larger needs. And as I think, this card points out, necropolitics as relief efforts. So it's helping us trace some of the ways in which the state and larger structures shape our lives and take this pandemic moment or the uprising moment or other kind of large scale catastrophes and make use of them while reminding us of our potentials to use these as organizing moments and use these as awareness raising moments, and kind of refuse to have a kind of linear model of progress and refuse certain narratives about our place and what we're supposed to be doing.
Anybody else on the panel have thoughts, responses to this card, feelings about the card?
I think for me, the thing that several things stand out, but what feels like the provocation behind this is not only to link your awareness to these structures and to name them, but that it also is giving you a kind of template to think about your own agency in the context of something that is literally overwhelming, and that, you know, that final line, you know, is, you know, the kind of emergency is also like a kind of, you know, self-making emergency, that we're always reinterpreting the world, and that, you know, in this, it's in moments of crisis where those where we rewrite things, and so I really love the kind of, you know, naming of things, and giving a kind of like visual and symbolic language to that, and then also putting it sort of back in the reader's hands.
Yeah, I love that about the card. Great job, Simi.
You know, we have some folks who would like readings, but I'm wondering too if maybe we could do parallel readings with like a breakout room.
Okay, how do we, did we figure out the breakout room mechanics? I know there were some logistical issues. I'm gonna stop screen sharing.
Okay. Oh, it does look like there's a question as well.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions. I don't know where the questions are. People are asking Simi questions, which make me so happy.
The person who wants to ask a question keeps dipping in and out of the Zoom room, which is difficult. It might be bad service or something like that.
Sense.
Unfortunately, the way the Zoom was set up, we do not have breakout rooms, which
because
is
it's a webinar.
Yeah, webinars and breakout rooms apparently don't play super well together. But we do have 3 people who are ready for live tarot card readings, if that's what we're leaning towards right now.
Possibly. So how much time do we have, Jason?
We have probably about 20 minutes left for this session.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to do, I think we could do, well, let's think about this. How to do a tarot reading. So to the people who have requested the tarot readings, I'm happy to do that live. It can be quite a vulnerable process. So that's why I'm not sure how much people want to engage. The way I do tarot readings with these cards is conversational. So it's not simply I read the card and tell you like your future. It's a kind of give and take. And so I'm a little worried if it's not a small breakout room, that it may not feel like a space that people could share and really get a lot out of the reading. So that's one concern, since this is right now being, you know, broadcasted live and not as a contained space. That being said, I'm just thinking on the fly right now how to modify.
One of the ideas I have is I can make a parallel room with my other Zoom like account, and then people can join that room for the tarot cards if that works for people. And I could allow screen sharing and stuff like that. That would just mean that the 2 of you guys wouldn't be part of this panel for a temporary moment. I don't know if that works for everyone.
That could, yeah, so that's one way we could do it. Thank you for that. Where it becomes more kind of personal or individual. The other way possible is to do sort of just more public discussion about some of the cards that I can draw for the people who want cards drawn. Does that make sense? So it's less kind of personalized to them and more like if I drew a card for them, I can just talk about that card publicly. So maybe could we ask the people who are requesting what they would prefer? And Jason, do you have preferences as host?
No, I mean, I think this speaks to the versatility of the cards, and as you said, kind of teach the teacher. So I think, you know, modeling, you know, how to kind of, you know, engage, you know, is one way to kind of demonstrate the uses of the material. But I'm also, you know, like I kind of follow my own script too, and you know, and it's just great to see how other people use this. And so I think like a public reading that can, you know, that offers, you know, different ways for people to identify with it, you know, I think maybe gives the most people the chance to see how the cards work in concert together, and the kinds of provocations and, you know, what is it called, intersections, you know, two kind of adjacent cards kind of develop an emergent meaning, and you know, so that could be one way to kind of split the difference. And maybe Kenny, maybe we can bring on the people who who opted in for the reading. Maybe we could bring them on as presenters so we can see them and they can, you know, interact should they wish to. And I think they are my students too, which I'm very excited about.
Awesome. Yeah, it seems like a lot of people want to opt in towards like the open conversation of it. Some people
Cool.
stated they have no preference. Yeah, so I think it just, a lot of people are saying like it gives a lot of perspective and allows to show all different meanings of the cards. So at this time, I'm gonna bring on those 4 people as panelists. They can feel free to leave their video on or off, engage in a conversation. So yeah.
Let's do that, and we'll do like, I mean, so I don't follow tarot rules, which I know pisses some people off. I do whatever the fuck I want. So I'm happy to do this as like a kind of communal reading. And we'll think of it as this moment of these people wanting to engage, and then we'll pull a card or two and talk about it communally and what it might mean for these 4 wonderful volunteers, but also maybe for our group as a whole. We can try to interpret it that way. I see a couple of nods from the panelists. Okay, let's try that. Does that feel good?
Yeah.
So for the folks who are joining, if Jason said that they are students, is that correct? Some are your students. So I definitely think we should talk about the student card then. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so I actually can screen share that, since I don't have all the cards available for screen share, but I can screen share the student card. So let's say I am pulling the student card first for these participants. Let me find the student. There it is. So let me read it. So the student is the 29th card in the Major Arcana, sometimes known as the Lost card. The student cried the day of graduation. They play one role for the mother, another for schools, another as the daughter, another for workforces, another as the model minority, another for the state, always in the pull of the annihilating void. The student is, at essence, a note taker. Be grateful. Always be okay. Chase the promise of this for hours. Never complain. Never be sick. Keep going. Nothing is ever enough. The work goes impossibly on. Is college life normal stress? What would it mean to leave? Strike that. We are finishing our parents' immigration stories, leaving behind the fact of living. We are not grades, a condition of what can't. Don't feel guilty. Strike that. Drawing the student card in a reading reminds you that student debt extends forward and backward across our collective lifetimes. But ask yourself, what is it you actually owe? Your entire personhood, and then more. We gave you your past, now give us your future. The student urges us to refuse. If schools are a feeder system for churning out good citizens, embrace being a bad citizen. Embrace being a bad subject, a bad student, a bad child, a bad person, a revolutionary. Remember that the Asian American movement was birthed in the fires of student protests, written by students everywhere. So this card is our only card collectively written by a group. I'll let you say a little bit kind of how we thought about creating this card.
Yeah, so I mean, the larger project came a lot out of both of our teaching, and Mimi teaching classes on Asian American mental health for a number of years and wanting to think about the needs of her students and listen to what they were telling her. And this card is a kind of evolution of that, where we thought if we're going to create a card called a student, it only makes sense to have it be
Written by students.
Written by students. And so in the course of traveling and giving talks, in many cases brought by student groups to different universities across the country over the last few years, doing sessions on Asian American mental health and doing work on open and emergency, doing pop-up wellness events like this, Mimi, and in some cases when I tagged along me also, we would ask students to consider writing to be part of this project and to be part of this card. And so what you find in this card is a kind of gathering of lines. And in some cases, like where it's like cut into fragments, these are literal fragments that and notes that students wrote, but all of the language is student language that we then ask some other students to help us kind of edit and gather into like and form into a card that has some kind of like coherence and progression. And so I think this is one of the cards we're the proudest of and we're most excited by. It's kind of potential to be a way of looking at our lives, but through the prism of a kind of collective student experience and a collective set of students wanting to think about what has shaped their experiences and what they see as a way of looking at themselves and looking outward for other students to be able to kind of fortune tell and to diagnose and self-diagnose and diagnose one another and be thinking about what are the various forces that really impact us and that really shape our wellness and unwellness. So as far as a kind of reading, like we would love to open, as Mimi mentioned, like there's things we can zero in on and talk about what came from where, or some sense of what came from where, or certain things that kind of resonated from conversations with students who left these with us, but would love to, I think as a practice, just like, had I drawn this card, what line jumps out? Or like, how does this help me think about my past as a student? Or how does this help me think about my work as a teacher working with students? And so I would encourage anybody who wants to jump in, like what resonates with you? What line feels powerful to your own experience that tells you something or reflects back to you something that you know, or that that it feels important for you to think about?
And there's no like right or wrong answer. And what I actually find when people do readings for themselves, you can pull the same card and have a different experience of it, right? Like a different line means or jumps out to you at a different moment or has a different resonance because of the particular experience that you're having right now versus say when you read the card a month ago. And so I love asking students when they look at these cards is what resonates right now for you? What line jumps out? What is it? Does it tell you something about your student experience right now? And then like Lauren said, for educators, for faculty too, as a teacher, what does this tell you about your own experiences and engaging with students? So yeah, what jumps out to folks? I think Grace is raising their hand.
Yeah, hi. This is my first Zoom webinar, so I'm kind of like shaky on how the format works. But I think, yeah. But I think a line for me that really sticks out is chase the promise of. And that kind of speaks to the idea that, you know, if you get grades and if you get the master's and if you get the PhD, you will be happy in life. But I think sometimes that's just not true and we need to acknowledge that.
Mm.
Yeah, I do love the language of chasing and promise, that education is supposed to, we were told, right? It's supposed to get us something. What is the thing? So you said happiness. What the fuck is happiness, right? And how is it related to the act of education? It's supposed to be a clear linkage. And then when you actually look at it, is it actually a clear relationship? And I think a lot of my students would be like, have asked the same question as you. Like, is this supposed to get me something? What is this thing I'm supposed to achieve? What is happiness? And whose dream is this? Is it my dream? Is it someone else's dream? And how does my participating in this chasing of some promise fulfill other people's dreams on all different levels?
And what does it mean for you to remind yourself of that in a reading?
Mm.
Or on the other hand, what would it mean to remind a parent of that reality in a reading for a parent who is thinking about that in relationship to what their parenting of a child looks like. Or maybe,
Yeah.
you know, some of this that was so powerful for us is like being in communities of teachers. What do teachers fail to see about the humanity of their students? And what would remembering what you picked out, Grace, help a teacher do differently as a teacher and as a human? How does it help them like rethink their experience and their work and what they're doing to remember that about students?
Thank you so much for that. Any other thoughts? Any other lines or questions about the card too?
Hey, I'm Nelson. I don't know, I guess the last couple lines that talk about, you know, being a revolutionary and how the Asian American movement was birthed in the fires of student protest. I think the fact that this ends on that, and that it's mainly talking about the pressures that like the individual feels, I guess, you know, that are thrust upon them from our society. It's interesting because I think, especially like now, when it's hard for us to like ignore everything that's going on in the world. Like a lot of us want to be like revolutionaries and, you know, want to do this and that and make change. But at the same time, it's like a lot of, it's a really big burden, it seems sometimes. And it seems like a lot of stress and like, you know, like self-sacrifice and stuff. But I mean, while we're trying to make the change and like free people, you know, our society from like all of this, we're simultaneously, by doing this, we're freeing ourselves, I guess.
That's super powerful. I love your observation of like, I mean, there's a lot of individual pain in this card, right? You talked about the pressures, but then you link it to thinking about both individual and communal responsibility, right? And that the tension between those. I really appreciate you pointing that out. And then how do we, the tension between individual pain, but also thinking about making change and responsibility for that. And then how do you bring those two things together in a way that doesn't obliterate you, right? Self-sacrifice is a very fraught, you know, term. I hate self-sacrifice. I hate the idea of martyrdom and like giving yourself up for something. And so can we take the term revolutionary and think about it in a different way that doesn't involve actually having to, if you go up to the middle of the card, keep going, never complain, do it like, does it have to take that form, right? Or can we actually revolt from that form?
I love that the card ends as it does, and Nelson, that you fixate, you know, that you pointed us to that as like both an endpoint and as a starting point. And like, you know, circling back to something Jason brought up at the beginning of the call of like, what is the place of Asian American studies? And I love asking ourselves to remember that Asian American anything, that any of us that work on anything that has to do with organized Asian American anything under any banner that's Asian American studies, Asian American arts, Asian American student organizations, Asian American, you know, political affiliations, it's all thanks to students that protested, that all of it flows out of student protests in the 60s and 70s and beyond, right? Like every program, any department at any school is always thanks to students that fought for it. It was never granted. It was never, nobody sat down and thought it would be a good idea for us to have Asian American
no
studies
administrator
here.
Sat around and said, let's just throw money into an Asian American studies department right now.
That'd be good. We should be learning about this. This would be great and empowering for our communities. No, it was because students demanded it. And I love that as like a kernel that has to be remembered as part of any Asian American anything.
Because for me, it was important for me to include that as we edited and curated this card, because I wanted to not just remind students of their power, which I love reminding students of their power. Administrations are only afraid of students. They're not afraid of faculty. They can just fire us, right? They fire us all the time. They're afraid of students, and students don't realize that, I think, sometimes. But I also wanted to remind Asian American Studies as a field of faculty, they're dead, and their responsibility, right? Like we all do or don't have jobs, but the ones of us who do have jobs have it because of students. And so what is our responsibility to students if we remember that our field comes out of students? And then if you read the card, the kinds of pain that students are under and pressures they have to deal with, that we have a responsibility to see that, to think about it as we're doing something called Asian American Studies.
Also like the way of rethinking protest in terms of learning. In this case, it's literally about protesting for the right to learn about what you want, what feels important to you. And in this case, the erasure of your own histories and experiences and those of your community, and demanding the right to have that validated as worthy of study. But like thinking about like the pain that is so present in this card in the relationship to learning, and what kinds of learning we are allowed,
why is learning so painful,
or enabled or forced to do, versus the kinds of learning that we need to do that like are liberating and liberatory.
Thank you so much for that. Any other thoughts or feelings about the student card? Yes, I think it's Allison, is that right?
So the line that stuck out to me the most was definitely where it talks about how student debt extends forwards and backwards across our collective lifetimes. That one really resonated with me because I think about like my education and my family, and how even if like that student debt is physically paid off ever, I don't think I could ever personally pay off that debt no matter what I do, because I was fortunate enough to have parents who helped me out with money. So I feel like that type of debt will stay with me forever. And I always have to prove through, like, if it's in more degrees or more accomplishments, like that will always stay. And I don't know, it's just interesting to think that even like that piece of student debt, it's my debt, but it's also my family's debt. And any success that comes from it is also my family's success. So all the good and bad from me furthering my education is a direct result of my parents and everything they worked for. So I think that is kind of like a blessing and a curse, because if I don't live up to that, it's going to be a lot of pressure. But if I do, I think it would kind of reinforce everything that my parents worked for. So it's kind of like there's two sides to it, definitely.
The stakes are very high. I love that you keyed in on debt, not as just financial, right? I mean, it seems like immediately you were like, yeah, no, when we say debt in this card, we don't just mean money, we mean, and then you talked about your sense of feeling indebted to your family. And that's exactly what I think the card was trying to capture, that sense of debt. And what you described so beautifully is the consequences of that sense of debt. So then what you owe, how do you pay it back? And it grows out from there. It's not simply like pay the money back or say thank you. It's much more, it's all encompassing actually. And so I am indebted to Erin Ning's work on filial debt. She's an Asian American Studies literary scholar at UC Santa Barbara, who wrote a book called Ingratitude that talks about this sense of debt that children of immigrants often experience. And that's really helped my thinking around how to describe what you're feeling, and the inescapableness of it, like feeling like the stakes are really, really high, because if you don't do the right things, then not only are you like a bad person or you fail at the thing, like you fail at school or whatever, but you also fail at paying back this debt. You fail at being the kind of grateful child that you're supposed to be for all the opportunity and all the sacrifices. And so for me, the stakes keep getting raised when you understand that how debt functions. Did you want to add something? Or you take a breath?
No,
No?
that was great.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Like, I'm really happy to see that resonated with you, and that the card was able to capture something of that experience for you. I think we are, oh, Jason, I want to check. We're a couple minutes over time. Should we wrap up? I want to make sure everyone feels good about our discussion of the card if they want to add any last thoughts or feelings quickly. but I do want to be respectful
Thank
of
you.
the next person's time as well.
Yeah, if there are any, Dom or I think Dom was maybe the only other student on the call. Yeah, if there's any other comments, I mean, we will revisit these cards later. As everyone can see, I mean, this is such a generative process, and so, you know, by asking these questions and engaging this material, we bring ourselves into a a community dialogue between ourselves, where we share things that we might not have shared had we just said, what's it like being a student? So I think there's there's a real genius behind this that will continue to, as Mimi said, this is something to revisit continuously.
I want to let just have one. I think they've unmuted themselves. I want to make sure they have a chance to
please,
say.
please.
Just one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I know you guys are running a little, the time is a little weird, but I'll be really quick. I really liked the lines on the roles, like the student, they play a role for the mother, the daughter, and for the state. I feel like all of my life I've been like chasing roles to make sure that they're all in line. And as soon as I entered like college, I realized that that wasn't a reality that made any sense. And having like time to like break away from hearing like things like your future is like set in stone because of how much we've done for you has been like really weird. Just not hearing it is enough for me to change my mindset. And I think that was a lot to take in for my first year. I think that a lot of my friends also had that experience in their college time. So it really like resonated with me.
And then it's the dreaded major change, changing the major as site of drama and trauma for a lot of students. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So I guess we should wrap up. So I want to thank everyone who's spoken definitely about their thoughts and feelings about this card. And I want to thank everyone who's just been witnessing it and personally reflecting about the card. This is a card that's very near and dear to my heart. So I'm really happy that we pulled it today and discussed it together with students, but also with the audience. And I hope that people continue to meditate on its messages. I'm also happy to share this card digitally with anybody who doesn't already have it after the webinar. And now I think we will close this and then cede speaking powers and screen sharing powers back to Jason, the host. Thank you so much.
All right. Gosh, thank you, Mimi and Lawrence. Yeah, so we will continue the conversation on that part. But we really, we've got an amazing, set of other activities to attend to that I think will grow out of this conversation. And so I want to